all of my life, I will sing of the goodness of God. Good morning, happy Easter! Yay! Happy spring equinox, happy everything. We are all here together today in a place of absolute co-creation. And our title, what we're speaking about today is Raise the Roof. And my little subtitle of that, not little, but the subtitle that showed up for me is Take Off the Pressure, Let Up on the Pedal. Yeah, so before we start, as you know, I always like to start with something a little giggly so that we know, we remember, we get to be in a place of remembrance that in all the, for me, seeming seriousness of the divine, there is still the giggles, there is still the humor, there is still the love and the joy. So there was a congregation that invited their minister and the minister's family to he got invited to their congregant's house for Easter dinner. Okay, and this congregant was known for what we would say in the culture I came from. She was known for being able to burn, which is she was known for being able to really cook delicious, delectable, scrumptious things, okay? So they go there and they bring their son, it's the ministers and their son. And so they bring their son, his name is Trevor, and so they go there, they're greeted, the minister after the service greeted by the congregant, and so they sit down to eat, and so their plates are already served to them, like their plates are served to them, helped and served to them. And the little boy, Trevor, just dives right into the food, and the father says, wait a minute, you know better than that. We always say prayer before we eat our food. And the little boy says, well, yes, at our house we do, but this is at the house of someone who really knows how to cook. Yes. Isn't that kind of a little upside down, inside out thing? So anyway, yeah. So happy Easter, and here we are, and this is Take Off the Pressure and Let Up on the Pedal. So I looked up, I thought I knew, but I looked up, how does a pressure cooker work? When I was a girl, we had a pressure cooker all the time, and it was always going. However, when I was a little girl, I remember I was always given the admonition, do not touch it, it's very hot, and other relatives would say, and it can blow up at any moment. Now, my mother would always say, that's not true. However, that was my idea about a pressure cooker. So when I looked up to see what a pressure cooker does, because I do know they are back in fashion these days, that a lot of people use pressure cookers now these days. They're very convenient. So what does a pressure cooker do? First, it heats up the water inside. There's water inside, and it heats it up higher than the boiling point. It heats it up so that it creates steam, and that steam evens out the pressure. Okay, that's the first thing that it does. And then the pressure inside forces heat into the food. This is very fascinating to me. I don't know if it is to you, but I had never even thought about this. And then the other thing it has a valve. And that valve is a safety measure. So when the pressure gets too excessive, it lets some of the steam escape. So it came to me that our life is just like a pressure cooker. Our lives can be just exactly like a pressure cooker. And I was thinking about this, being with this last night when I closed my eyes to go to sleep, and I realized that part of the life that I might be living, and you might be living too, you can agree with me or not, is that the pressure that gets put on my life is put on by me. That it's not the pressure that outside forces put on my life. It's not the pressure that my mother and father, not my children, not my employer, or anybody. Is the pressure that I put on myself. Sometimes that's just how the way life goes. However, in our life, we have instances, just like the steam that gets created, where we have water in our life. Let's just use that analogy. There's water in our life that gets heated up. There are several instances in anyone's life where the flow of life might feel like it's really getting heated up. So in those instances, it's giving us an opportunity to have the blessing of perspective. Yeah, like if I think something is terrible is happening, let's have perspective. I actually shared this information with Deb Santamaria and Terry today. I was so concerned about what am I going to wear on Easter Sunday. I mean, it got a hold of me yesterday and wouldn't let me go. However, then I spoke to a friend of mine who was having chemotherapy treatment yesterday afternoon, and she was going out to have some lunch so that she could get out of the house. And so that really, it brought it home to me, the blessing of perspective, that we have a choice about what our perspective is. And we have a choice, too, about the perspective of For what reason is this happening to me? And I have the answer to that question. I know that's a question we've all had. The answer is, it's happening for our greatest expansion, for our greatest growth. It's happening to bring us to that next level of enlightenment where our soul already is there, and now the rest of us gets to follow along. Our mind and our body gets to follow along. So that's the first part about how life is like a pressure cooker. And the second part is the pressure inside forces heat into the food. And just what I just said, that's our expansiveness. And in that part of our life, we get the opportunity to say yes to the spaciousness of the divine. The spaciousness of the divine within, through, and as each one of us. Because for every challenge within myself, within you, within me, there is always an answer. Because the challenge doesn't show up by itself. The challenge shows up because the answer is already there. The answer is already there, saying, my beloved, precious being, here I am. Ask me. Open to me. Allow yourself to spend time in the silent conversation with me. And the answer shows up. I mean, one of our principles here is meditation. For all of us, and I know that every single one of us does meditation, and if you don't do meditation, it's a practice that is invaluable. That's one of the ways to get the answer. Allow yourself to deepen in meditation. Allow yourself to be steeped in meditation. Allow yourself, even if it is 3 minutes of meditation, 5 minutes of meditation, it need not be. You need not be on the pillow for hours and hours and hours and hours. It can be a minimum, what you may feel is a minimal amount of meditation. And these days, we can avail ourselves of meditation in a myriad of ways. If you have a smartphone, or if you have a phone that's not called a smartphone, you can find meditation. If you have a computer, if you have any sort of device, meditation is available there. And the other part about it is, and there is no perfect way to meditate. When I first started meditating, I used to really be hard on myself because I would think, oh, I'm not sitting still, my body is twitching, I'm having all these other thoughts. And then I came to understand and know and learn that is meditation. There we go. That's the deal. That's what's happening. All sorts of things are happening. And that in meditation, like that kind of twitching and maybe things that show up, is things that are coming up to be released. Things that are showing up things that we've excavated now and they're ready to dissolve and dissipate themselves. So the other part about life that is like the pressure cooker is the valve, the safety valve. And what is the safety valve in life like if it was a pressure cooker? This is an easy one. Our spiritual practices. Yes, prayer, meditation, journaling, service, being of service. Yeah, spiritual practices. I loved it when I was learning about pressure cooker because as soon as I saw the safety valve, I thought, oh, that's it. Our spiritual practices. That's exactly what the safety valve is. So, as the reading said, thank you, Sarah, so much for the lovely way you read both readings. The reading about being a kaleidoscope, and I looked up the definition of a kaleidoscope. I'm segueing a little here. And a kaleidoscope is continually changing, shifting patterns of color, shapes, light, and brilliance. Does that sound like our lives? It sounds like life to me, continually changing. The patterns change and shift. The skin that we all have today is not the skin we had 7 years ago. Yeah, it's physiologically. And things change all the time. I was talking with someone the other day and they said, yes, the one constant about life is change. It always changes. So here we are on Easter Sunday, and that kaleidoscope of our life that the reading said that we get it just right. We get it perfectly put together, and kabam, life shows up. Things happen. Shifts happen. All sorts of things show up. And then I realized that kaleidoscopic artistry I was making was about control. Control, control, control. So the 2 C words today that I'd like to share briefly is control and the Christ consciousness. Yes, if we allow ourselves to know the Christ consciousness, then control is not important. It's not something that in our humanness will bring us assurance or joy or safety or serenity. And on this day, the day that we call the Resurrection Day, we each get to know that the Christ consciousness lives and breathes and has its beingness within, through, and as each one of us. That this is a day of resurgence, of rebirth, of regeneration, and that the Christ consciousness in us is always there, available for every single thing. So, 3 things that showed up for me as a result of this is awareness, aliveness, and acceptance. And the first thing is being in a place of awareness, doing what Reverend Joan taught me probably 20 years ago, doing the witness activity. Being aware of what you might be thinking, being aware of what you might be doing, being aware of your perception, allowing yourself to be in absolute compassionate detachment, no matter what's going on in your life, to have the love of the divine for oneself, to know that we are loved beyond measure, that the love is completely unconditional, and it's always there. So in the place of awareness, and something that really was funny to me, and it just popped into my head. So part of this being in the place of awareness is being aware of the ego's orders. You know, sometimes our ego orders us, gives us orders, yeah. And my ego does it all the time. My ego says to me, well, who do you think you are, Verona? It does. It says that to me. And in all transparency, I share that with you. And it says that in different situations. The last time it said that was yesterday. I was talking with one of my sisters, and we were talking about Easter, and we were talking about Good Friday, and we were talking about all the things that we learned as little Baptist girls. And this sister of mine is now an Episcopalian. And so she's rattling off a bunch of rules and strictures to me about Easter Sunday. And I was able to say to her, my beloved sister, it's all about resurrection. All that other stuff, it's not required. It's just about the resurgence of the divine, the Christ consciousness within and through and as us. Now, this is my elder sister, who happens to be a lot taller than me too and bigger than me. And she up until recently, I would not have had the compassion or the chutzpah to speak to her in that way. However, when I spoke to her in that way, my ego said, who do you think you are speaking to her that way? So I was able to, in my place of awareness, I was able to say to my ego, thank you, ego. Would you like fries with that order? That my ego, yes. So the next thing is aliveness. And aliveness I've already talked about. It's a day of resurgence. It's a day of rebirth. It's a day of reawakening and letting ourselves reawaken in every single moment. And the third one is acceptance. Accepting the Christ consciousness within and as each one of us. And I do know that in some of our previous religious trainings, the Christ may have triggered some resistance. So right now, I'd like you to give yourself a moment. Just take a deep breath and allow yourself to, if it's there, to witness the resistance to Yeshua ben Joseph and allow it to release itself. It is only a name. It is only a word. The Christ consciousness has its depth, its embodiment, its expression in, through, and as each one of us. So before Reverend Joan comes up, I'd like to invite you to dance to your innate, bespoke dance of the kaleidoscope of your life in awareness, aliveness, and acceptance.
Whoa, thank you, Reverend Verona. That was wonderful. Now I have to speak. Now I get to speak. Yay. Wow, Easter. Happy Easter, everybody. Those of you on Zoomers, those of the Zoomers, Facebook Livers, all of you love streamers, I'm so happy that you're here with us today. And I want you to know that your consciousness lifts us all just as much as every one of us in this room. So just be aware of that. So I'm taking a breath because, you know, I never knew what Reverend Verona was going to say, as you know. So anyway, the words that came to me for this talk, Raise the Roof, were the words celebrate and rejoice. And it made me think of of kind of a joke that I heard. Some of you may have heard this. There was this monastery, and the monks had different chores, and this one monk had the chore of going down into the basement and looking at the old archives and rewriting them. They were getting old, so he's rewriting all of this, and he comes up, and first of all, he gets really in distress when he's down there. And he comes up and he's looking so distressed. And the other monks say, well, what's wrong? What's going on here? And he said, oh my God. He said, the word is celebrate, not celibate. I love that joke. I absolutely love it. Celebrate. You know, we're here to celebrate. And I'm not knocking celibacy. As you know, I was celibate for 9 years, as a nun. And I really appreciate that way of life because it freed me to give my full attention to deepening in consciousness, to deepening in that mystic awareness. And I was in a wonderful community, but that's not what the talk is about. The talk is about raise the roof. So there is this urge within each one of us. As Reverend Verona was speaking, I was thinking, yeah, that urge, that wants to bubble up, that wants to express, that wants to have us be our greatest yet to be. And that urge is the I am presence within each of us. And the I am presence is the Christ consciousness. The Christ consciousness is the same as the Messiah consciousness, the Krishna consciousness, the Atman consciousness, the Buddha consciousness. Pardon me, it's all the same thing. And what it means simply, it simply means I know my oneness with the infinite. That's all that it means. And so Yeshua was called the Christ because it meant the anointed one. Basically, it meant he who knows who he really is. He who is anointed, he knows his true nature. And when we look at the teachings, we see that over and over and over again. And I think, Sarah, you mentioned in your beautiful prayer, what he said is greater than this shall you do. So he gave us a mandate, as all of the great avatars and teachers give us, and sages and mystics. They don't just say, this is mine, I'm the only one. They're an expanded consciousness where you too can be this. You too can do this. And so for me, that's what raising the roof is about, is to be ourselves. Raise the roof of your consciousness. Raise the roof of your consciousness. Now, what came to me yesterday as I was walking along Crab Cove, I'm so blessed to live in a beautiful area. So I'm walking, and a lot of the talks download there. And what came is that for the roof to be raised, the glass ceiling has to be shattered. The glass ceiling has to be shattered. And we all have a glass ceiling. We all have, maybe some of you, maybe the enlightened one is here. Even Jesus had his glass ceiling for a moment. Even he did, Yeshua, he had his too. So we need to shatter that glass ceiling. And what does that mean? What's that glass ceiling? It's that part of us that says, I can't do this because. It's a lot of what Reverend Verona was talking about, so I'm not going to go over every single thing, but it's that one that says, who do I think I am to be the one, to be the Christ, to be the Messiah, to be, that enlightened? How, who do I think I am? And also it says, I don't think I'm really going to put my time and effort into it because I probably won't be able to do it. I'm afraid of failure. That's a glass ceiling, I have my doubts, I have my fears, I'm afraid that, yes, I'll put all the spiritual practice in it, and then I'm still just my little caterpillar crawling on the ground. You know where I'm going with this, the caterpillar and the butterfly. Spirit's going there because it just brought that up. But, so we have all of these reasons why we don't want to be great. And one of them, for some of us that were raised this way, it's, well, that's not humble. That's kind of arrogant. And Reverend Verona spoke to that. Some of us were raised to think that we weren't enough, right? Any of you in this room that were raised to think I'm not enough? Yeah, there you go, a whole lot of us. And that we got to shatter that glass ceiling, And so how we do this is we become very, very aware And this goes with what Reverend Verona was saying, and I'm going to say it again because it's never said too often. We become very, very aware of what triggers us, of what we get upset about, of what we get angry about, what we feel hurt about. I can see you getting very quiet. So, and I want to bring the world into this right now. The world, which, as Reverend Michael says, is different than the planet. The world is the result of all the collective consciousness that we're living in. And the world is birthing. Something new is being birthed in the world, right? And you might think, well, you're getting off track here. I'm not really off track. I'll tell you why in a minute. So, thank you, Van. So what we want to notice is these things in the world. The Ukraine, Gaza, a whole lot of people are fired up about both of those, especially Gaza, and I'm not giving an opinion. What I'm saying is this might trigger you. It might trigger me. Any sense of racism, bigotry, when we see it happening, we might get triggered, and I think it's wonderful that we have a value system within ourselves where we can see that what's right and what's wrong for us. And here's the thing, we can notice it. Personally for me, I don't want to see the war in Gaza. I don't want to see people in famine. However, if I start to get triggered and feel really pissed off, really angry about it, get in a snit about it or something, I've got to look within myself. And I have to say, is that somewhere in me? That's how we shatter this glass ceiling. If I'm judging someone, if I'm having fierce judgment about someone, where is that in me? And Dr. Hugh Lin, who did Ho'oponopono, any of you know Dr. Hugh Lin, that was his practice. And all of these criminally insane people got well, they got healed. And the simple practice was this. He looked at their crimes, and he said to himself, where is that in me? And he went about healing himself. He went about healing himself. He never had counseling sessions with them. He never really worked with them. He worked on himself. And what's that? That's the principle of oneness. Because the reality is what's true within me is true within you. We're all one. We all have the same challenges, the same and when I work on my consciousness, when I see the beauty in you, like he was seeing in himself where he was judging, where he was perhaps being violent, you might say, well, I'm not violent. I've said I'm not violent. However, there's a lot of ways to be violent. Just going to say that. I was in a workshop once, and the minister who was facilitating us gave us all a quality, and they weren't pretty qualities. And mine was theft. And I thought, I don't know why this is coming up right now, but it was theft. And I'm thinking to myself, I give generously. I don't steal from people. I've never done that. I've never was even one of those kids who stole a candy bar. So what's up with this? And she just had us go in and be aware of it. And I realized sometimes I steal people's time. At the time, that was the realization. Sometimes you steal people's time, or sometimes you steal their valid emotions, or sometimes do you see? So we can say, well, there's nothing in me that's happening in Gaza. Well, maybe there is. Maybe there is, and maybe there isn't. But we get to look at all of those areas of our lives, and we get to say, where is this in me? We get to look at the world and say, where is this in me? And I tell you, as we heal ourselves, we shatter that glass ceiling, and we get to soar in consciousness, to absolutely soar. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here, every single one of us. And as one of us soars, it lifts the entire vibration of the planet, of the world, I should say, of the world. And I know it's hard times right now. I know that. And I also know that we need skills to cope with. And Reverend Verona gave you basic, a lot of the ones I would have given you, which are be aware, notice what's going on in your consciousness, be aware, and then when you're aware, you can make a choice. Do I want to continue on the same path, or do I want to change? And then on the third one, which a lot of people don't do, is follow up. I do my spiritual practices, follow up. If I'm guided to do something about some of these world issues, follow it, do it, So those are the practices. And, look in myself. It's a practice of forgiveness, really. What's going on with this other person that I might be judging? Wow, what's that in me? Where's that in me? And it takes us deep, beloveds. It takes us so deep. I want to give you one last story because this is a story I just like this story. I meant to give it earlier in the talk, but you'll see how it works here. So, some of you might know this one again, but there was a baby eaglet that landed in a chicken coop. Any of you know this story already? Oh, okay, good. So the baby, Reverend Verona does, so the baby eaglet falls from this nest. It finds itself in the middle of the chicken coop. And the chickens are very accepting. They're a very inclusive group. They thought this eaglet looked a little odd, but they were very accepting. It looked a little different than the rest of them. They were accepting. And so, and it taught the eaglet how to be a chicken. And so the eaglet is scratching around for food and doing all the things that chickens do. And yet there was something in that eaglet that said, I'm different, Something's wanting to happen in me. And so he noticed all of a sudden, he looked up in the sky and he saw these eagles soaring. Well, this one eagle, not a bunch of them. He saw this eagle soaring. This is a Native American folklore, by the way. And he's noticing this and he's like, wow, wouldn't it be nice to soar like an eagle? But I'm just a chicken, Wouldn't it be nice? And one day, a big eagle lands because he spots this little eaglet who's now grown. Probably it's a teenager eaglet now. But anyway, the eaglet has grown, and the eagle lands and says, what are you doing down here? And the eaglet says, well, I'm a chicken, and I'm down here in the chicken coop. And the eagle says, no, you aren't. No, you're not a chicken. You're an eagle. You can fly. You can soar. And so, the eagle steps aside and he said, try it, And the little eagle, whatever age this eaglet was now, flaps its wings and starts and it soars. Do you recognize this story? As each of us, there is an alternate story that I never saw before. That I must have seen it because I had it in my computer. But this part of the story is that this little eaglet, and her name was Susie, she actually has a name, this little eaglet was really getting her goodies from conforming. That all the chickens were saying how wonderful you are, how amazing you are. And the little eaglet was feeling very good about this. She was getting all this validation for conforming. Does any of this sound familiar? She was getting all this validation from conforming, and an eagle lands again, sees this little eaglet, and says to the eaglet, you're an eagle, you're not a chicken. You can fly, you can soar. And she listens to the eagle, and she's kind of afraid, and she goes back and tells the chickens, and she says, I'm really afraid, I'm comfortable here, and blah, 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 and goes about her business. And the next day, the eagle comes back again and said, you can soar, you can do this. And Susie's like, oh, okay, well, thank you for that information, and I'll fly, I'll soar, I'll practice. And then she goes back to the chickens, and she says, I fooled him. I fooled him. I'm not going to do that. I love being with you chickens. I love being comfortable. I love being validated. So my question is, which eaglet are you? Are you the one that's going to choose to soar no matter what the other chickens in the barnyard think of you, Are you going to soar, or are you going to stay comfortable? I was thinking yesterday of the caterpillar and the butterfly. You know, that's a traditional Easter thing that we do. And as I was walking along Crab Cove, I was kind of chuckling to myself because I thought, what if the caterpillar resisted going into the cocoon? What if the caterpillar just thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to construct. That's crazy. I'm comfortable down here. You know, I'm comfortable down here. I've never known a caterpillar. Well, I've never known a caterpillar, but I've never known a caterpillar. I've never known that a caterpillar could ever even do that because it's in its DNA to form that cocoon. It's in its DNA to be the butterfly. It's in your spiritual DNA to soar, to raise the roof, to celebrate who you are, to love who you are, to rise, rejoice. And with that, we're going to pray. Reverend Verona's coming up.